Welcome into another edition of Carp's Corner. Excited to have you here. Excited at this time of the year, college football playoff. It's finally here. It is going to be happening on Monday night. We'll dive into Georgia. We'll dive into Bama. It's a rematch of the SEC championship game. Can Kirby Smart finally kick that monkey of Nick Saban off of his back and take a look at that and see where he has the potential to maybe get it in, maybe get one over on his former boss, his former head coach. Dive into the Caleb Williams situation. I know it's been a topic of conversation. A lot of people have gotten into it, and where college football is headed is something that people like. Those are all questions that we'll have to answer as far as Caleb Williams and this new era of like what looks like basically to be free agency for college football. And they have it in the NFL, and it works out all right, but there are some constraints around it. So we'll dive into that. Take a listen there. Jim Harbaugh beats Ohio State, wins the Big Ten championship, first college football playoff appearance for Michigan. Is he already done? Is he on his way out of Ann Arbor? Where could he potentially be headed? College, NFL, we'll take a look. Some concerning news about a beat writer for the Chicago Bears coming out. One of the 50 AP voters will also vote for the NFL MVP. Some of his thoughts and what his name is and what he actually says he's going to do and who he is not going to vote for. And then Baker Mayfield, Cleveland Browns. Is he in or out for Cincinnati? How does that look? How does that impact everything? And could the Browns be bringing competition? And we'll take a look at a couple individuals that are currently on rosters that I think could be available, who would make a lot of sense for the Cleveland Browns, who ultimately have a team that's just about ready to go. And then also Hall of Fame finalists are in. I want to make a pitch for two of my former teammates. One of them especially. I know one of the guys is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but another close friend of mine who I grew up watching play and then was fortunate enough to get to play beside and privileged enough now to call him a friend. He deserves to get in. He's got the accolades. He has the performance on the field. So I'll let you know who that is. But starting out, college football championship, the playoff, it's finally here. We've been waiting for this thing all year long. We talked about how back in June, like, hey, could sit down. If you gave me 5 teams, I could probably guess maybe 6. Out of those 6, I could get all 4 playoff teams. Well, that wouldn't have happened this year. Cincinnati gets in, Michigan gets in. Now, probably would have had Ohio State on that list, maybe Oklahoma. But then you also had Bama, you had Georgia, potentially Clemson. Well, Ohio State, OU didn't make it. Clemson didn't make it. Bama and Georgia did, and they are here. They are in the college football playoff championship game. Going to be taking place in Indianapolis, which I know for a lot of people from the South, they loathe it. It's going to be cold. It's going to be this. Folks, the game is inside. And when you go to Indianapolis, there's a lot of great places to eat. A lot of stuff is inside. A lot of it's connected. It's a great city to host events because the downtown is set up really well. The stadium's right down there. It's very similar to a New Orleans. It just maybe doesn't have quite the history, the culture, the warm weather to go with it. And I know that that's a big piece, but nobody is playing outside. So let's not worry too much ultimately about that, but it's going to be a great venue. I think it's going to be a really good game. So Bama is a 3-point dog in this. So Nick Saban is loving the rat poison that's been given to his team one more time. You saw what they did with that yummy rat poison that he referred to in the SEC championship game. Can they do it again? And it's always interesting when you play teams twice in a year, and especially you play them twice in a pretty close proximity and time frame. In the NFL, you do it all the time, your divisional games. Played the Philadelphia Eagles actually 3 times in 2009 and played them back-to-back, last game of the season and then playoffs. And there was a lot going into the last game of the season. Whoever won the division and hosted the other team the next week. Dallas Cowboys, fortunately, won both of those games. But preparing for that second week, you start thinking like, well, we did this and it worked. Will they do something to take advantage of it? Will they change what they did? They did this well. Will they stick with it? And, so you get in your head a little bit. And so with only a game separating these teams, and I know there's more time, but time can be your enemy to start thinking about it and chasing ghosts. you only have really one game to analyze this. And, so Bama, as you look at this, has won with Nick Saban the last 4 against Georgia. And you have to wonder, like, is Nick in Kirby's head? I think half of the time that Georgia's had a better team. Heck, they've led, I believe, in almost every game. And some of them deep in the second half and couldn't pull it out. And so you begin to wonder, like, will Kirby start doing things that he hasn't historically done? Or will he just kind of lock in and ultimately try to do what they did, just do it better and maybe not let the game get away from them? And understand that Bama, what they did against the Georgia defense, spread them out, a lot of quick screens, swing passes outside, lateral runs, up tempo, wear that terrific, tenacious defensive line out, tire them out. Then you can run the ball a little bit with Robinson. Then you have some drop back passing availability with Bryce Young, and he's gonna have all day to throw. Now they're not gonna have Mechie, which is a big deal, but they still have Jameson Williams. And Cincinnati's got a pretty good front. I mean, they were able to get after Bryce Young a little bit. Now, Georgia even takes that to another level and with more guys. But since he probably has a better overall secondary with Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner, they were still able to throw the ball some. Now, they loaded it up and ran a lot against Cincinnati. I think that's really a function of how Cincinnati was built and what they wanted to do. They weren't going to let them beat them over the top, and they were going to yield some rushing yards up front. Georgia, I think, would be wise to take that approach. Build the net. Force Bama to drive it on you. And in turn, I think if you can get in a slugfest, that is Georgia's pathway to victory. But you cannot give up the big plays. You can give up those crossing routes. Let your D-line work, but make sure you're playing coverage that will not give up those home runs. And we'll give you 2, 3, 5 yards. Force them to complete them consistently. Now, Bryce Young is really good. And he's shown out well in big moments. SEC championship game, played well against Cincy. But remember this, coming out, it's second half, it's 21-6. He throws an interception over the middle to the Cincinnati Bearcats, and they've got the ball at the 50, with the chance to go down and potentially make it a 1-score game. So it's not like he's been invincible. And he made some mistakes in that game. But Nick Saban, 7 national championships. I'm not foolish enough to bet against that. The guy's been absolutely tremendous. He's been really good, and he always has his teams prepared. I think Georgia's more talented. I think Bama's the better coach team. And you saw that out there with their game plan and what they ultimately do. Now, Stetson Bennett played much better against the Michigan Wolverines. He looked competent. He looked composed throwing the football much better than he did against Bama. But remember this, he also was playing with the lead, and a fairly sizable one, and also not getting very much pressure. The Georgia front did a terrific job of blocking up Jabo and Hutchinson. And so that gave Stetson Bennett the time that he needed to be able to push the ball down the field and have success. The Georgia running game was pretty good as well. They were able to rip off some runs and kind of bludgeon Michigan. But that was just really a bad matchup for Michigan. They were like Georgia light. And so that's why you sit here and you see Georgia -3, Bama a 3-point dog. They already beat this team. I said they don't have Mechie, but if I'm going to sit here and put some of my soft earned dollars on this game and sit here and look at everything, I think it'll be a lot closer than last time. I think it's going to go deep into the second half. And I hope for everybody's sake, the entertainment value is going to be great because I want to see a good game. I want to see a really good game, but I got to take Bama. I got to take them to win straight up. And maybe Kirby Smart proves me wrong. And Dogs Nation, I'll be the first to sit here and take a knee. I think Georgia is a more talented team. They've got to keep it close, and Stetson Bennett's got to play the game of his life. And they have to do a much better job because I think Bama will spread it out. They'll hammer Robinson again, a little bit like they did to Cincy, but they'll wear out that defensive front first, just like they did the first time. I'm curious to see Kirby's answer to what they did, because it's not like you can really change who you are at this point in the season. Now, I mentioned the fact that college football, the games weren't great. It was, I believe, the lowest rated playoff games, heading all the way back to the beginning of the playoff. New Year's Eve isn't a great time for games. Now, I know they have to horse around with the Rose Bowl and everything. Put them on New Year's Day. Don't put those games on New Year's Eve. Heck, Ohio State was out drawing those games in the Rose Bowl. with Utah. It was a much closer game. I get it, more competitive, big comebacks and swings. But college football, you've got to find a way to make sure those games are premier games. Now, the competition level of it is going to play into it. The brands, the teams playing are going to play into it. But I would argue, Cincinnati, they were a great underdog story to the evil Bama. And Michigan has a massive following and is a national brand. And Georgia and Bama have been on the scene for a while. And so you've got to structure those games and put them in better slots. Like I said, Ohio State, Utah, the Rose Bowl, that thing blew out numbers for a game that is essentially, quote, meaningless. So when you look at that and you understand it, like that has to be something that moves into the selection set and understanding, like, I don't care. They've got to talk to the Rose Bowl, do the parade of roses the next day. It doesn't matter to me, but I don't want these games on New Year's Eve anymore. I'm a married dude. I've got a wife. Like, getting guys who love football to sit down and watch, like, unless their wife is diehard and passionate. And my wife loves football. Like, sometimes you want to be like, I can give you New Year's Eve. Can I give you the holidays? Just a little bit. We watch so much all year. And so you're kind of one eye on it. You're sitting down and I'll watch it. And my wife did, but there's a level of guilt that comes into play. It's not so on New Year's Day. So they have to find a way to correct that problem and get them on New Year's Day. Continuing on with Caleb Williams, Oklahoma quarterback, enters the portal, said he's not ruling out returning to OU, but is basically listening and fielding offers. It's college football free agency. I'm all for player empowerment. I think it's a great thing. Coaches can leave. They have buyouts, by the way, that someone's paying, either they or the teams. And the NFL guys can move around. However, they have contracts. They can't leave until their contract's expired or the team trades or releases them. And so now in college football, this one-time transfer rule, like, you have a great season, you may be at, an average school, boom, I'm just going to open this up to the highest bidder. I'm not necessarily against it, but there's something that just kind of tears at the fabric a little bit of doing it that way. Like, I'm all for these guys making money, but playing one place 1 year and then just opening it up again and saying, hey, who wants to pay me to go here somewhere else and get an NIL deal and all this stuff? I'm just trying to figure out, what the end game is with this and how college football ultimately looks. We've arrived here. Like, you're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube, but I do think we need to sculpt some guidelines and some parameters about how this thing is going to operate, because if not, it's going to get real squirrely in a hurry. And you're going to have guys jumping and highest bidder stuff. And believe me, like I said, I'm for these guys making money, but the ability for them to leave, after 1 year playing great and then just like opening it up, not really just to see where they can make the most. And so what is that doing with your team that you're currently at? And I'm curious how these NIL deals will be written and how everything's going to be structured with that. And, it started going through my mind. Rick Neuheisel brought up the question to me, him and Childers. I was doing some XM work, and like, what about Columbus, Ohio, or anywhere for that matter? And we're going to institute a tax. And with that tax, those tax dollars, we're going to fund NIL deals for players. What would stop that? I mean, you think about it, teams, they do it for stadiums. You have hospitality taxes or a little income tax here, or whatever it might be, bed tax that helps pay for that. It's going to facilitate the businesses. Hey, we want more games. If they're going to be an 12 team playoff, like, we want our teams playing. Restaurants, bars, they love it when they have that. People fill those things up, have a home game, the hotels, they're going to make money. What would stop that? What would stop one of the athletic departments in the Big Ten or SEC, now that they're going to be getting, $75, $90 million coming in from these new TV deals once they're finished up, have a quasi agency that they create, put $10 million in that pool, have an administrator run it. They kick in, donations from the private industry, and that's run separate of the athletic department. And they call it, blank state, marketing. And they run that. And that's part of the package that you're putting together for players. Like, these are all ideas. And I'm not saying that they're good or bad. They're just out there, and it's going to substantially change the fabric of what we've watched for so long. And so I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to make sure that you can maintain some of the nostalgia that people love while also getting the players, I believe, what they want and deserve. It's going to be a tough thing to tightrope and a tough thing to balance. Jim Harbaugh gets everything done this year, checks all the boxes. He's been at Michigan, Heck, you're approaching a decade here soon, I believe 7 years. The guy's in his upper 50s, beats Ohio State, wins the Big Ten, first time outright since 2004, I believe. And then or maybe 2003. And then ultimately makes the college football playoff. Did a lot. Now he gets the college football playoff. And I think when he got there, realized something maybe Ohio State did, a number of years back, something that Oklahoma's found out. Washington, like playing Bama, you're playing Georgia, you're playing Clemson when they're at their peak. Like, dude, you got to up your game now. You need to recruit at a high level. You have to have mountains of great players, because if you don't, you're going to get steamrolled. They're going to run you. And so Jim Harbaugh, after the game, end of the season, he's like, this isn't the end. He goes, I think this is just the beginning. And so you hear him say that, and then all of a sudden, now you hear the fact that, he's maybe interested in some of these NFL jobs, maybe the Raiders job, maybe the Bears job, former Bear. He was a quality control coach, got his start in coaching with the Raiders before going to San Diego to take over their head coaching job. So you hear that and you think about that and you're like, all right. I mean, there might be something a little bit to that. And the rumor was last year, I mean, COVID shortened season. I think they went, 2-4 or whatever. People, they couldn't wait for Jim Harbaugh to get out of there. You felt like they're almost trying to push him out. Heck, they crushed his salary down. I think he took that personally, but he was sniffing around just about every NFL job that was open, trying to find some interest. People weren't that interested because they weren't that good. And the old adage, strike while the iron is hot. The iron's hot right now for Jim Harbaugh. Guy's in his upper 50s. If he wants to get back into the NFL, which it seems like he does, his actions and, what he's kind of done, and you hear his name popping up, it's because, he's sniffing around these jobs. Sounds like he wants to get back. If he stays in Michigan for another 10 years, good for him. Great for the Wolverines, great for the Big Ten. I love it for the rivalry. He seems to have that thing rolling. But next year, they're losing Ajabo, they're losing Aiden Hutchinson. McNamara is coming back, but they have McCarthy, the young freshman who's playing really well at quarterback, have to figure out what to do there. There will be some retooling that they'll have to take into account. And so you're 57, 58. You don't take something that's offered this year. Well, next year you could be 8-4, 9-3 again. And you have to wait another year to have maybe a really good year. And then to be the year after that, you'd be in the NFL. And I don't know if the NFL at this point is really consistently hiring coaches in their 60s. I don't know if that would happen. And so I see if a job is offered, it's the one he likes, I could see him taking it. And I don't blame him. I don't hold that against him. It makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. 2 jobs, Raiders, like I said, coached there before, Bears played there. I think it would be unbelievably ironic with how him and Urban used to go at it if he took the Jags job. You got Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if Shad Khan would hire another college coach, but Jim Harbaugh does have NFL experience, so that would separate him a little bit. And Jim Harbaugh is a prideful guy. I think he would relish in the fact to go down there and turn that thing around with what Urban couldn't get done. I think he would enjoy that challenge and really enjoy, forcing the crow onto his former adversary if he's able to get it done. And like I said, they have the quarterback. So those are all some options there. I think if he is presented a job, I think he ultimately goes. Now, is he presented one? Well, we'll have to wait and see. And the coaching carousel is going to continue to spin. Now, one of the teams that I mentioned, Chicago Bears, their beat writer, Hub Arkish, their beat writer, goes on. He's talking on Chicago radio about, MVP voting. He's a member of the AP. 50 people vote for the MVP out of the Associated Press. They're not allowed to say who they're going to vote for, who they did vote for prior to the release. But he toes the line. He even acknowledges that and coming out saying he's not going to vote for Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't think a guy who is, a jerk to his teammates, not a good teammate, not good to the city, the organization with what he did beforehand, throws out the COVID stuff and everything, and lying or whatever, just he calls him a jerk. And so he's not going to get his vote. Maybe he's good enough, throws out Tom Brady, throws out, Jonathan Taylor. Like there's other guys that are worthy. I think Aaron Rodgers has clearly been the best player this year. And talking to some other media people, first of all, many of them get far too sore and butthurt about everything that goes on that they don't agree with, that they feel like players are there to serve them. And if This guy has an attitude. He has that. Listen, it's like the NFL Hall of Fame. Lawrence Taylor's in there. O.J. Simpson's there. There's a lot of bad people in all 4 major sports Hall of Fames. That's the reality of it. Mickey Mantle's a drunk womanizer. I mean, there's a bunch of dudes that you could point to. Like, I don't want my son to grow up to be like that guy. I don't want to be like that guy. You know, I don't want my daughter to marry somebody like that. But it's about what you do on the field. That's what it matters. And there's incentives tied to this. There's monetary compensation tied to the all-pro teams, tied to the MVP. And for somebody to come out and say, I'm not going to vote for that guy because I don't like him because he's a jerk. And then I hear all these people, well, it should be about being a good guy too. No, they have an award for that. It's called the Walter Payton Man of the Year. MVP, most valuable player, the best player in the league. That's what it's for. And it makes me sick. It drives me nuts to think that somebody, whether you like the guy or not, you hold your nose. They did it to T.O. for the Hall of Fame. They did it to Chris Carter. It's ridiculous. You have to be able to separate your personal biases, put those things aside, and vote for the player that you think is best. That's it. That's all you're asked to do. And it shouldn't be that difficult. There's players that I didn't like, and we're filling out our Pro Bowl ballots. Man, this guy's a jerk. I didn't like him on the field, but you know what? He's darn good. And so you give them their respect because that's what it is. It's not, hey, this guy a clean player? Is he a good guy? Does he treat his family well? Is he nice off the field? Does he donate his time? None of that stuff matters. It matters as a human being, but it doesn't matter when you're talking about voting for something like that. Baker Mayfield, I mentioned before, previous episodes, you know, that they might need to bring in competition for him. Well, he's not going to play this week against Cincinnati, which I think is a great move for him because one of the worst things that's happened, he's a first-round pick. Joe Burrow's a first-round pick. Browns have been bad for a while. Bengals have been good, but they dipped down again and were bad for a couple seasons as well. Baker got in the playoffs last year, but Joe Burrow looks really stinking good, like almost MVP caliber good this year. And so the Browns are comparing him with that. Pay on the hook for 18, 19 million next year for him. You're going to have to find a way to pay it. They got it. They can take care of it. They budgeted it. It's not a ton for your starting quarterback, but I think they need to bring in competition, as I've said before. That'll get the best out of Baker. He's a competitive dude. 3 guys throwing out there. David Carr, I think he could be available with the Raiders. Kirk Cousins, I think he'll be available with the Vikings because there could be a lot of movement up there. And then also Jimmy G. I think he could be available with the Niners. And now a lot of those guys you think stopgaps, although Derek Carr is playing really, really good football this year. You look at this. Ryan Tannehill was basically kind of those guys when he was in Miami. He goes there to compete with Marcus Mariota in Tennessee. Ultimately wins the job. You look at what he did last year. You're like, all right, he had Derrick Henry, great run game. Look at what he's done this year. Even without Derrick Henry, they're on the precipice of being the 1 seed. He has done a fantastic job. One of those guys could turn out to be Ryan Tannehill because you just need a guy to be good for the next 3 or 4 years. You don't need a 10-year answer at this point. It'd be nice to find one. I don't think you'll find one in the draft. Browns need a receiver, clean up some other areas. They got some good depth, but that roster is loaded and ready to go. Those are their answers. Finally, in closing, Hall of Fame finalists are out. A lot of got quality players out there, a lot of talented guys who all deserve, most of them, in my opinion, I think deserve to get in. How do they get in? I don't know. DeMarcus Ware played with the guy for 4 years in Dallas. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He was one of the best rushers in the league for a number of years, dominant edge player. And that's my criteria. Were you considered or in the conversation for best at your position for like a 3 to 5 year span? Another teammate of mine who's now he's up for his 3rd time. DeMarcus is first year up. Zach Thomas. Guy's a 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, and the 2000s All-Decade team. It's his 3rd year being up. The undersized dude from Texas Tech. He taught me so much about the game. I am so grateful for him. To be able to call him a friend on a personal level is an honor because he's a guy that growing up, like friends had posters of him on their wall. I had a Sports Illustrated cover with him on my wall, but he was one of the best at his position for the 4 to 6 year run. And when that is the case, you're an all-decade player. And if you're an all-decade player, in my mind, you should be a Hall of Fame player because you were the best among your contemporaries. Let's try to get Zach Thomas in there, man. Long time Miami Dolphin, played with the Cowboys briefly, and one heck of a player. Good dude, but that doesn't matter. But he goes in on his merits and what he was able to do on the field. And it was big time ball, folks. The dude ran around undersized, the whirling derby, making plays everywhere, run game, pass game, blitzing, did it all. You don't get to be a 5-time first team All-Pro and 2-time second team All-Pro just for being a good dude who tries hard. Zach Thomas, don't let the size fool you. He's one of the best, and he should be treated as that. And he needs to get in the Hall of Fame. Well, that's it for this edition of Carp's Corner. Next time, we will break down, talk about all of the playoff stuff, everything that's going on with the national championship, how that looked, coaching changes, the NFL season will be over, who's in the playoffs, how that looks, getting that stuff out there. The world will be swirling. The Olympics will be coming. We'll dive into that even a little bit too. Thanks for watching. See you next time.